Good evening. It is October 20th, and we are studying Ephesians starting in chapter 4, verse 17 through 32. If someone will read those chapters for me, those verses for us quickly, and we'll begin right after. Thanks. All right, pushing play again, and now we are talking. Let's remind ourselves back in verse 14 of chapter 4, verse 14, that in this context that Paul is talking about asking us no longer to be children, and then he concludes the chapter last week about being specific about yes, we are ecclesia, we are one, and also but that we also have individual responsibilities. But then that leads us to what are these responsibilities? Number in verse 70 says that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. Now, this seems to put us back into the Jewish and Gentile discussion again that we got through in chapter 2. Let me just be very clear that that discussion was taken care of in chapter 2, which he says in verse 11, you were once part of the uncircumcision, and in verse 15 we are part of the you are one new man, and that in verse 19 that they are also that the non-Jewish people are sons of the inheritance. So we're really not discussing here the issue of ethnicity. What we're talking about basically in the rest of this chapter is the difference between spiritual immaturity and spiritual maturity. The lifestyle of a Gentile then is marked by the lifestyle of a person who is spiritually immature. Now, again, there's one thing we can discuss is that he is referring to believers, immature believers, and he's talking about, well, what is spiritual immaturity? Well, these are the things that the Gentiles do, and these are things that we ought not to do. Number one, their mind is vain. Number two, their understanding is dark, meaning they have no light. Light, by the way, is a symbol for wisdom or knowledge, not experiential knowledge, as in we know the Messiah. And number three, they are strangers for the life of God. Life is spelled out in the Torah, and therefore, if you do not understand or if you do not follow Torah, you're a stranger to Torah. You're a stranger for the life of God. Number four, the hearts are blind. Number five, their hope is cut off. Number six, their souls are without hope. This is soul, the word nephesh, the word breath. Your breath has no hope. Because of greed, your work is unclean. Look at Genesis 3:23 in a moment. Take a moment to read that. And look, you'll get a practical understanding of what is clean work. The conclusion is that a person who is a believer is not part of the Gentiles. In other words, for those people who have become believers, your identity is not as a Gentile. According to Ephesians, the concept of a Gentile Christian is actually an oxymoron. You cannot be a believer and also be a Gentile. Now, continuing on now, this kind of brings us to verse 20. It says, "This is not what you learned in the Messiah." Verse 21, "Assuming that you heard about him, were taught, as the truth is in Jesus." This is the basis of truth. So therefore, we should put off our old selves and our old manner of life, and we are to be renewed in our minds. We are to be a new self after the likeness and the righteousness and holiness of God. Now, as the son of a new man, we are new men, we are new creations. This is the very simple concept. This is actually the concept of Israel, the concept of Yehudah. These are the same concepts. A Jewish person is one who praises God. Israel is one who struggles with God. So being a new creation or having a new self, a new identity, this is a very Jewish concept because the very nature of who Israel, Jacob becoming Israel, that is what he did. He put on a new self, became a new creation. Now, starting in verse 25, then we kind of have an expounding upon the Torah here. He literally is just referring back to different aspects of the Ten Commandments, and it's just reminding us that we have commandments to keep. Now, just to be clear, in the Old Testament, people talk about 613 commandments, and we can't keep all of those. But just to be clear, if we follow the New Testament, there's actually 1,050 plus commandments. So, if we want to try and be legalistic about, counting commandments, the New Testament is far more excruciating difficult regarding keeping commandments, because what Jesus expounds upon, when he expounds upon the Torah, he restricts things and makes these following these commandments more tight, not more loose. So when people say, well, we are freed from the Torah, we are freed from the law, they really do not understand what the concept is that they're talking about. And in fact, getting into the whole numbering system at all, I really think really leads us down to some of the path of immaturity. Now, so then we start in verse 25, and he just expounds upon different things that we are not to do. That things that in keeping with the Ten Commandments we do. Therefore, put away falsehood. We speak in truth with each other because we are members of one another. We're one. Don't be angry. Don't give a place to the devil. Don't steal. I mean, again, we're talking to believers here. Don't let corrupting talk come out of our mouths. Don't gossip. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit. I want to pause on that word, grieving the Holy Spirit. One, we could just, cause the Spirit to be bitter with us. But however, this would be like taking the Lord's name in vain, in Exodus 20, verse 7. But it might be more possible that the word lupeo is the idea that we cause bitterness to other people, that we cause people to be bitter towards God. This is the very common thing that believers oftentimes create a much negative image of God. We look at people's sin, we judge people for their sin, and why do people want to come amongst a lot of people where there's no love and all they're going to get is judgment? That isn't what God is talking about. I think that is something that causes the Holy Spirit to be grieved when we as believers do not love those who need Him the most. And that's the next verse. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you. I do not understand sometimes, but as believers, sometimes we are bitter because the whole world is full of sin. We cannot respond to the world with bitterness. We have to respond to the world in love. And that's verse 32. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God, as the Messiah forgave you. As believers, as the ecclesia, if we want people to come and join with what we are doing, then we must be loving, we must be kind, we must grow in our spiritual maturity. Thank you. Shalom. I hope everyone has a wonderful week.